Good evening, everybody. I'm C.J. Ward.
And I'm Beth Farnsworth. Immigration enforcement in our area has sparked a political standoff. Congressman Salud Carbajal is urging Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown to push back against what he calls violent and militarized ICE operations.
And the sheriff says state law ties his hands, but some residents argue the law itself is the problem. Federal immigration enforcement in Santa Barbara County is drawing fierce criticism from local leaders and sparking a debate over who can and should intervene. In a letter addressed to Sheriff Bill Brown, who is president of the Major County Sheriffs of America, Carbajal wrote, "We call on you to do everything within your power as the leader of this national law enforcement advocacy organization to publicly stand up against the administration's dangerous immigration enforcement campaign that is putting your constituents in harm's way."
Clearly, we've seen a disproportionate response by ICE. We've seen overkill.
Carbajal is calling on Brown to use his unique position to push for de-escalation.
The Sheriff's Office would like to remind our communities that we do not participate in immigration enforcement, including assisting with ICE operations.
I don't feel free.
I should not be scared for my people.
Brown says he's not ignoring community fears, but under California's sanctuary state law, SB 54, his office is prohibited from participating in or stopping ICE field operations.
We only cooperate with ICE as permitted under SB 54, that California law, and that's only with respect to notifying them of the release of criminal undocumented immigrants who are in our custody that are also wanted by that law enforcement agency.
He says the recent operations in Carpinteria and Camarillo were led by Homeland Security investigations, backed by judge-signed warrants, and not indiscriminate raids. But some people, like Christy Lozano, who wrote an opposition letter to Carbajal, say SB 54 should be amended or removed.
SB 54 is preventing the sheriff from being the liaison to the community. And so the federal government is coming in and having to do the job without his assistance.
Brown believes the solution to these immigration raids is not in his hands, but in Congress passing comprehensive immigration reform.
We have winked and nodded at this problem for the last 50 years. And these people are our neighbors, they're part of our community, they're entwined into our economy, and you know, we have this disconnect when we're now trying to solve it simply by deporting people. There's got to be a comprehensive program, and it's going to take both parties to make that happen.
We're giving this president a few bipartisan bills.
Carbajal says he's co-sponsored a number of bipartisan bills, including the Dignity Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, and that immigration reform now rests with the Senate and the president.
It's two bipartisan pieces of legislation that give this president no excuse to not reform the rest of our immigration system. Now that he's done and gotten all these resources to do all these draconian, aggressive, ridiculous actions that many of us are seeing play out.
And both of Carbajal's co-sponsored bills, the Dignity Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, were referred to committees and are awaiting consideration. Sheriff Brown says the Major County Sheriffs of America includes both Democrats and Republicans, and he's used his role in Washington to build ties with federal law enforcement. While not commenting directly on the administration's tactics, the group has called for an all-hands-on-deck approach to border security and praised the One Big Beautiful Bill for its federal funding of Operation Stone Garden, which strengthens cooperation between local agencies and Customs and Border Protection. Both Carbajal and Brown declined to be interviewed for this story.
And we are now joined by representatives from both sides of the aisle. Former State Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson representing the Democratic viewpoint.
And former Santa Barbara City Councilman Dale Francisco representing the conservative viewpoint. Thank you both for being here.
Yes, sure.
Okay, so let's start with the letter. Carbajal and 28 local elected officials are urging Sheriff Brown to publicly oppose what they call militarized deportation raids. Now, should the sheriff respond? Why or why not? Let's start with you, Dale.
No, he should not. It's a publicity stunt. Bill Brown is the only countywide elected Republican, and you'll notice all the signatories to that letter are Democrats. If Carbajal really wanted to get something done with Sheriff Brown, he could call him and talk with him. I'm sure his staff has Bill Brown's number. And these kinds of open letters, inflammatory open letters I might add, are meant to embarrass Bill Brown. That's part of what's going on here. And also to shore up Carbajal's support. It's really as simple as that.
Annabeth?
Well, I think that's a pretty cynical response, and I would have to respectfully disagree with you, Dale. Look, there is no reason that these raids are being conducted with the use of military-style weapons, people dressed like military warriors going into our local communities. If in fact there were warrants, and by the way, I know that Congressman Carbajal and our DA have never seen warrants. They have no information about this. But these warrants don't have to be served with 300 people in riot gear going into a community. And that's essentially what the ask was. The ask was to please tone it down, to really make sure that there is restraint, that the process, the due process these people are entitled to, regardless of whether they are here lawfully or unlawfully, should be pursued. And Bill Brown was in a position to do something about it and apparently didn't.
Quick response?
He is in a position to do something about it, and making a public statement denouncing Trump is not the way to get there. That's Salud's job. Bill Brown's job is to work with his organization, not all of whom agree with the Democrat position on immigration. It's a nationwide organization, and he actually has the ear of the administration. That's his job.
Okay, respond real quick.
Well, this is not about Bill Brown being embarrassed. This is about asking the man to follow and to encourage this government to support legal approaches. The rule of law is being ignored here. That's what this letter asks for, nothing less, nothing more, to benefit our community, which has been so humiliated and upset by what's going on. That's what this letter called for.
Okay.
This wasn't political.
Okay, next question. When it comes to solving the immigration crisis, should the public be pressuring Congressman Carbajal to push for federal legislative reform, or should more responsibility fall on local leaders like Sheriff Brown to speak out against these federal operations that are being carried out? Hannah Beth.
Well, there needs to be federal legislation, and in fact there have been efforts to have federal legislation. You mentioned that Congressman Carbajal back in 2019 was working on this, and in 2024 there was a strong bipartisan bill that had something for everybody and something, you know, compromising where not everybody's going to get what they want, that would have really addressed this problem severely. But Donald Trump said, it was before the election, he did not want this bill to pass because he wanted to be able to run on the issue. And so the bill was defeated, not by an actual vote, but by a procedural vote. This is not something that Trump wants to be resolved, because for him, this is an issue that divides our country, and it's one that most of the public does not support. We need to go back to what is appropriate and what is lawful approach to dealing with the problem.
Okay, Dale?
I just want to point out that that so-called bipartisan bill allowed 4,000 people to come into this country every day. That was one of the provisions in it. It was a bad bill, and I'm glad it didn't happen. Now, there was the Dignity Act that they were mentioning earlier that was proposed by a congresswoman from Miami, Republican congresswoman, in 23, had some problems too. But the version that's out now that has been revised could potentially be acceptable. I'm glad Carbajal is working on that. And that's the only solution to this problem. People, either the overdoing it with the enforcement, or the people with signs protesting federal law, that's not going to change anything. Congress has to change the law. And we have to protect the people in our community who have been here for 30 years, let's say, but who are illegally present, and there has to be a legal solution for that.
You know, in the political world, as you know, Dale, you compromise. Not everybody's happy. But Trump does not want to see this issue resolved because this is a way for him to impose his sense of power and control by putting military-style people out on the streets to intimidate our population. This is not what democracy is supposed to look like. And as far as federal law is concerned, ICE ignores federal law. They're not using search warrants, arrest warrants. They are not giving people due process. People are entitled to legal counsel. They're entitled to a hearing. None of this is happening with the way the Trump administration is handling this situation.
And Dale?
I think President Trump is interested in solutions. And if there's a good solution that comes from Congress, and I know that lots of Democrats, Hannah Beth, you're included in this, think that Trump is this authoritarian figure whose only interest in life is having power over people.
I do feel that way, and he's conducted himself in that fashion.
Because you believe that, you can't be part of the solution. The people who are going to work together to get a compromise on this are going to have to work with the administration that was actually elected by a majority of the American people. Okay?
And they were elected, but he was elected, but not to do this. The public, 78% of the public supports a legal avenue for these people to be able to become citizens. And Donald Trump has demonstrated, we don't have the time to show it, but he has demonstrated over and over again that he, in fact, is thirsty for power and is, in fact, someone who would like to be a dictator.
Okay. Hannah Beth, Dale, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you both, Dale, Hannah Beth.